Okay, let's really get into this. Imagine you're navigating a place you know really well. Maybe it's a classroom, could be an office, but suddenly you're experiencing it through a completely different filter, like a different sensory lens.
Hmm.
You're not just seeing what's happening, you're feeling the subtle shifts, maybe the atmospheric pressure, you're hearing the unspoken stuff beneath the words, noticing those moments where understanding just doesn't quite land.
Yeah, it's less like just walking down a familiar street and more like suddenly having maybe a thermal map or a map showing the hidden currents, right, for the same place.
Exactly. A map highlighting those hidden currents of communication, the layered ways people think, the tiny shifts in feeling that most people might just walk past.
Right.
And that's really the journey we're taking together in this deep dive. We're exploring this incredibly insightful, reflective essay. It's from one person's perspective, someone working right inside the world of education.
It's very personal. But the insights are quite powerful, aren't they?
Yeah.
About those subtle communication patterns, ways of understanding that often just get missed.
Totally. And our mission here is to really unpack those patterns, especially looking through the lens of what the essay calls Gestalt Language Processing, or GLP minds.
Right, GLP.
Yeah.
How do these minds navigate systems like, well, schools primarily in this case, which are often set up for a different kind of processing, usually something much more linear, step by step.
And the source uses these brilliant metaphors to help us grasp this internal world. It talks about the theater and the observer. We're going to use those as like guideposts for our conversation as we trace the day described in the essay.
Okay, let's step into that world then.
So the day starts, but not really with an alarm clock. The essay says this internal system, the theater, it's already humming. It's online, stirring really early, like 2:04 a.m. early.
Wow. And what's really striking isn't just how early, but how this theater starts organizing the day. It's sorting the caseload of students.
Yeah.
But not alphabetically or by grade. It's by resonance, by signal strength.
It's so different. It's like an intuitive triage based on who needs what. The connection, not just ticking boxes.
Exactly. Not the usual bureaucratic way.
Yeah.
And then there's this concept of resonance management, which sounds like more than just standard multitasking. It's described as handling multiple internal scripts all at once, like different frequencies playing simultaneously.
Yeah, like juggling different harmonic threads. You can imagine how overwhelming that might seem to a system expecting just one thing at a time.
Definitely. And the essay gives concrete examples, right? There's Matthew, needing that transition support for word problems.
Right.
Kendra, who drops initial consonants when she gets stressed. Oscar, needing that structured wait time to actually respond.
These aren't just names on a list. They're like active signals the system's already processing, internal scripts running before the school day even starts.
And this flows right into the physical preparation. Choosing clothes isn't just about what looks good. It's about sensory neutrality or pattern safety.
Yeah, and packing specific things, a plushie, fidgets the essay, calls them artifacts of a system trained to anticipate rupture even in the smoothest terrain. That phrasing it really hits you.
It really does. It highlights that constant, quiet readiness needed to navigate environments that can feel unpredictable, maybe overwhelming, when your system picks up so much subtle stuff.
Then the drive to school. It's not just a commute. The author is replaying echoes of things that happened before.
And this feels key, they're logging them as data. Not mistakes, not shame, just information.
Exactly, like a constant recalibration based on actual experience.
Yeah.
Learning.
So by the time they get to campus, the observer is fully engaged. It's reading classrooms like a barometric reading.
Yeah, room 7 is tense and quiet. Room 3 is frenetic. Room 11 is calm, maybe too calm, understimulated, sensing the whole vibe of each space.
And this sensitivity, it extends to noticing the GLP students.
Yeah.
They might not be loud or obvious, but they pulse with signal.
And that line, their silence is not blank, it's loading.
That's such a critical insight. It pushes back hard against assuming quiet means checked out or not paying attention.
Right. They're not empty. They're actively assembling meaning, recursively, building understanding in loops maybe. It might look like a delay, a gestalt, forming later than you'd expect in a typical classroom timeline.
Out of sync with the clock, yeah. And the essay points out that some students with SLD diagnoses, specific learning disabilities, aren't necessarily slow in the way we usually think of it. Their processing is described as submerged, multisensory.
Teleological processing toward a purpose, right? Not just reacting step by step.
Exactly. They're not behind. They're assembling understanding differently maybe more deeply.
And the observer is always scanning for that disharmony. The mismatch between the student's internal rhythm and what the teacher or the lesson is demanding.
That moment, a question lands like a stone,
Yeah.
instead of a key. Heavy, confusing, because it just doesn't connect with where the student actually is in their process.
So arriving at school isn't just walking in, it's stepping onto a dance floor where the music's already playing, maybe slightly off-key, and the observer is there, ready to sense the rhythm and anticipate the steps.
And the role itself, the RSP-like role the essay describes, it's not about leading the dance, it's improvisational choreography.
I love the comparison to mushroom jazz.
Yeah, layered, low tempo, super adaptive. Every move is a response. Every note is like sampling the environment.
It's reacting right there in the moment. A teacher suddenly changes direction, an aide is out, so a student's support is missing. Another student is clearly overloaded, arms crossed, looking inward.
The response has to be quick, subtle, tailored.
And the examples of scaffolding are so gentle. A post-it, a quick visual cue, a scaffolded question dropped gently, like, "What do you think your partner might say?" Offering help without making a big deal of it.
Yeah, without putting them on the spot.
And the internal experience for the host sounds intense. Hyper-empathy kicking in, feeling the student's struggle, the room's tension, but also alongside alexithymia.
Which the essay describes so vividly, not lacking feelings, but like a flood with no spigot, or reading a barometer with no number.
Wow, so the skill is holding all that input, all that feeling, without getting totally overwhelmed.
Right. The system is trained for it, but the essay is clear. It's not easy. It takes a toll. And the observer tracks those ripple effects. A teacher raises their voice just a little.
And a student flinches or laughs nervously or suddenly needs to sharpen their pencil right then.
Exactly. And the essay suggests the cause is often atmospheric, sensory, not just bad behavior.
The host describes their position in the room, too. Neither center stage nor corner shadow, just available, present, but not intrusive. Tethering things for students who might be losing the thread.
And operating across multiple timelines at once. There's what was actually said.
The literal words.
Then what the teacher meant, the learning goal.
The pedagogical intent.
And then crucially, what was felt underneath, the relational vibe.
And the essay argues GLP students pick up on the misalignment between those timelines first. Not because they're broken, but because they're so attuned.
Makes sense. So the actual practice becomes this constant loop. Rephrasing, slowing down, offering those scaffolds without fanfare. Tuning the prompt for resonance.
Not louder, not simpler, but more resonant, finding the frequency that connects.
And there's no manual for this, right?
Right.
The essay says it requires only attention, only care, only presence as praxis. It's all about being truly present and responsive.
You don't get applause for these quiet interventions, but sometimes there's that subtle shift in air pressure, a sign that something landed, something was held.
A quiet win, maybe only felt by the people involved. And through all this, the host learns to move differently. Not with the beat, the external rhythm, but with the bodies trying to keep up with it.
Moving on through the day, the essay brings in another group of students. The ones who are silent, but not because they're defiant. It's culture.
Yeah, their silence is learned as respect. Don't interrupt, don't burden, don't ask for help unless you're asked directly.
So the host has to listen differently, or maybe watch differently, looking for tiny shifts in current.
Micro-stillness, quick glances, the way they pick up a pencil, a held breath before a question they don't ask. That becomes their language in that context.
There's that phrase about sensing a gentle thrum in the field, a node pulsing quietly. Check on me. It's like an intuitive ping.
Wow. And the support offered has to be just as subtle, respecting that silence. A nod, a quiet whisper, sliding a scaffold across the desk like sleight of hand.
Discreet. Not making them break their cultural roles about seeking help.
And the essay stresses these students often don't have IEPs or 504s, no formal plan. But their communication patterns are unmistakable if you know what to look for.
You see the Gestalt traces in their work, too. Metaphoric language, vivid imagery, stories that spiral and return instead of going straight from A to B.
Maybe really rich with feeling, but they might look unfinished by standard school rubrics that want clear, linear arguments.
And that's where they get misinterpreted, right? Creativity is okay until it messes with clarity. Pauses mean you don't know. Tangents are bad. Unfinished work is just poor organization.
Instead of seeing it as evidence of layered processing,
Yeah.
a mind still weaving connections.
It leads to those really tough questions the essay asks. How many GLP minds are just missed? Unnamed, undiagnosed.
Labeled resistant when they're just thinking recursively, carrying shame about how their own language works.
That story about the 11th grader's dream story, marked off topic by the teacher.
But the host instantly saw it as true, a perfect example of that clash in perception.
And the host recognizes herself in these students, a generational echo, that grief that arrives not in sobs but in recognitions, seeing her own past in their present struggle.
Which links to her own experience of being misnamed all day, called Mr. Few.
Yeah, based on perception of physical presence, tall, strong, unsmiling, that Highland femininity clashing with her voice, her identity.
Until that one student sees a woman from a story, a moment of actual recognition. But the constant misnaming is just another layer of that disharmony she senses everywhere.
But she stays. The essay is clear. For the students, especially the unnamed ones.
And this leads to a kind of vow. Not a vow to fix everything or be perfect.
No.
But a vow to notice the student's intent, their reach, to acknowledge the effort, to name what was missed.
And maybe to become the teacher someone else needed but never had. It's about witnessing, affirming those other ways of being that the system pushes aside.
So as the school day winds down, the focus shifts a bit to the adults, the staff room, because the theater does not close when the students leave.
Right. The same kind of meaning misfires happen there too, rooted in similar processing differences, maybe, but also huge systemic pressures.
The host hears colleagues talking, misunderstanding a student's story as random when it was maybe a gestalt, seeing signal overload as just zoning out, thinking a lesson went sideways when it might have just followed a different logic for some kids.
And the essay is really fair here. It says these are good teachers, caring teachers.
Absolutely. But they're exhausted, undersupported, asked to teach 25 different nervous systems with one plan and a 6-page pacing matrix.
Exactly. They're rushed, pressured. And in that rush, nuance gets lost. Paying attention to different processing styles is just really hard. Things get missed.
The essay mentions specifics. IEPs going unread, accommodations becoming just box-ticking compliance, not connection, instruction aimed right at the middle.
Leaving kids on either side struggling.
And you see that painful loop play out. Student pauses to think.
Teacher sees confusion, repeats the question louder.
Student feels pressured, shrinks, guesses wrong, gets marked down.
Or the student offers a metaphor.
And the teacher, needing to keep pace, says, let's stick to the prompt, shutting down that different way of explaining.
It shows how the whole system's reward structure just clashes with these cognitive styles. The essay says, system rewards pacing. Curriculum prioritizes coverage.
But coherence does not live in the pacing guide, and understanding is not built in bullet points. Oof. That says a lot. Speed over sense-making.
And this is where the essay reframes the double empathy problem. It's not just personal, like autistic versus non-autistic misunderstanding.
It's bigger. A structural failure to perceive GLP communication across diagnostic boundaries. It's baked into the system's preference for one way of talking and thinking.
And crucially, some teachers are GLP too. Their tangents, their metaphors, that gut feeling that something just feels off.
Those are their resonance attempts, their natural processing style. But the institution wants compression. Squeeze it down.
So even adults learn to perform linearity, or just get quiet, hide their own style.
And the system's indifference, its failure to value things that can't be put in bullet points, leads to micro wounds.
Not huge blows, but small erosions. That glance when a kid stims, the rubric that penalizes associative writing, the comment, oh, he's just quirky.
Yeah, dismissive. And the essay argues these add up. Over time, they silence people. They teach you your way is wrong or less valuable.
It's a cultural gap, the essay says, not just personal failing. And it widens with every bell that rings before coherence is landed. Every time the schedule cuts off understanding for those who need more time.
So the observer thinks about reconciliation for this empathy gap, but concludes it doesn't really work. Not because the idea is bad.
But because real reconciliation would mean mutual restructuring, the system would have to change its values. Value metaphor as data. Trust silence as processing. Believe slowness can mean integrity.
And most systems aren't built for that kind of deep change, are they? They just double down on pace on stable outcomes.
So in that system, the GLP mind, diagnosed or not, will always seem delayed.
Not because it is delayed, because it's tuned differently, not broken, not behind, just a different operating frequency.
And the tragedy is when patterned resonance meets procedural logic, they each think the other one is broken, incoherent.
But one way, the procedural way, gets declared default. So the other way, the GLP way, has to compress or disappear, fit into a box that doesn't fit, or become invisible.
This leads to the cartographer's vow, which sounds like it comes from a place of deep fatigue.
Yeah, the burden of constantly mapping a world not built for you. It's quiet work, but heavy. That feeling of spoon debt, not theirs, but inherited. Wow, generations of navigating these barriers.
But the vow isn't about fixing the whole system or forcing everyone to understand immediately. It's more resilient.
It's to leave markers, to
Yeah.
make resonance legible, to let metaphors land without footnote. It's about making your own way of being visible and valid right there inside the system, for yourself and maybe for others too.
And it includes small, powerful actions within the constraints. To pause, even when the pacing guide demands the next step.
To trust that if the answer hasn't come yet, it is still coming. Trusting that different processing integrity.
It's a quiet refusal, isn't it, of the violence of the pitch, that pressure to compress everything, lose the nuance.
Exactly. A consistent, quiet, standing firm.
The essay ends the day with small things, locking the door, and that moment of recognition of the student correcting themselves, doctor.
Not a huge victory, maybe, but real. A genuine connection cutting through the usual misperceptions.
Then the epilogue brings back the observer, leaving, but holding on to that memory of a student looking up, meeting the host's gaze.
A moment of silent coherence. Resonance between two minds that get it. That recursive way of thinking.
And the essay reflects on the host, Dr. H, as irreducible, not fitting neatly, showing variance. And maybe the key takeaway is that the autistic mind, the GLP mind, cannot be resolved, only met, only noticed, only accompanied.
You can't fix it to fit the system. You have to meet it where it is, support it.
And Dr. H, the cartographer, is still doing that, still mapping the terrain others ignore, still building what the observer only watched, enduring.
Mapping a different way forward.
And this whole incredibly personal story connects back to you, the listener, because the essay is framed as just an answer to simple questions. Tell me about yourself. How was your day?
And for a GLP mind, those simple questions can trigger this whole complex internal world, the theater to unfold.
The drive home to the ridge isn't just a drive, it's a decompression chamber.
Yeah, essential. A space where those recursive thoughts can finally spool out freely, where silence is made through volume, allowing that inner world to just be without pressure.
The essay itself is positioned as a refusal of the elevator pitch.
Right. A rejection of quick, easy answers. It insists understanding is earned, not extracted. And that metaphor, recursion, and slowness are not indulgences. They are epistemologies.
Yeah.
Valid ways of knowing.
So powerful.
And it ends by acknowledging you, the listener, as a resonator. Just for sticking with it, for engaging with these ideas, and how much that resonance means, especially to someone whose way of thinking often feels invisible.
So we've journeyed through this essay, from the intricate theater inside to the classroom observations, the challenges of a system not built for resonance, and landed on the quiet strength of the cartographer's vow.
It's a really potent reminder, isn't it, that everyday life in places like schools is packed with complex communication layers and huge potential for misunderstanding when different ways of processing aren't just present, but actively devalued.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the systems we build. Who do they work for? Who gets left out or forced to contort themselves?
Definitely. So maybe a final thought for you to take away. What might we all be missing? In our schools, sure, but also our workplaces, maybe even our families or friendships. What are we missing when we constantly prioritize speed and that kind of surface clarity over potentially deeper, slower, more resonant ways of understanding and connecting with each other?